Testing, 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 testing. All right, all right. Sounds like we're good. Long time no see. What's going on, everybody? Been a minute. It has definitely been a minute. Certainly some things have happened. First and foremost, actually, I've actually missed out on a lot. I didn't make a live stream after the draft. I went live on draft night at the stadium, but I think that's the last time I've posted on here. I haven't. I didn't tell anyone what I thought about our draft on here. Obviously, our schedule came out 2 months ago. I didn't give any thoughts on that. Um, a little later on in the stream. Um, However, for first and foremost, hope everyone is doing all right. Hope everyone is, getting ready because we're actually only, I believe, 2 weeks away from the beginning of training camp from players reporting. We're only about 2 weeks away. We're past the 4th of July. And I think we all know once you get past the 4th, um, it's really just all downhill from there. We're in the home stretch. And before we know it, it's gonna be August, time for preseason, and then September 7th, first game of the year versus Tampa Bay. Got a little bit of news about how that game may look today. But listen, I'm very excited. Obviously, the Braves have had a season from hell, so I haven't been able to find any joy with them. So I'm ready for football season at this point. I am fully ready to get back into that stadium, get back to Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Even if, I mean, we're less than a month away from the first preseason game, and even if it's preseason, just get back in that stadium, and really take in the atmosphere and the feel that comes with it. So certainly, there's a lot to be excited about, depending on how you look about everything. But we're here to talk about the new season of quarterback. There have been 2 seasons of quarterback. Both seasons have involved the Atlanta Falcons, and they're the only team I believe that has happened to. Yeah, they're the only team that has happened to. So, 2 out of the last 3 years, the Falcons have let Netflix into the building. Shout out to Netflix without anyone knowing it. And I gotta imagine that, for the second time in 3 years, especially for a lot of guys, it, had to have been a little awkward to around a couple of years ago was when Mariota was here. And we know how that ended with him getting benched late in the year for Desmond Ritter. And second time around, this time around, Kirk Cousins. It was actually the second time that I mean, he's been on quarterback both times. They come into the building, document Kirk's journey throughout the season, and it ends with him getting on the bench. Now, I will say, obviously, whereas Mariota essentially did leave the team, Kirk did decide to stay for the end of the season, so he does earn more respect there. But at the same time, if you're getting paid as much as Kirk Cousins is getting paid, there's no reason to leave. With that being said, man, I'm here to give some thoughts about obviously everything I saw throughout the 7 episodes that are now available on Netflix. And obviously there's been a lot that you can say, a lot of ways that I think you can take what some of the stuff that I don't really think we learned anything particularly new. I mean, maybe there were one or two things that we learned definitely from at least Kirk's perspective, and it was nice to see that. But I think most of the things we kind of we had a pulse on. It's not necessarily outside of maybe one thing that I'm going to get into just in a second, wasn't really overly shocking. So let's get into it. I got my notes here, took notes all from all 7 episodes, and going to read off some of the major ones. First of all, man, Kirk's an interesting dude. I gotta say that. It starts with him going on vacation to Antigua. I hope I'm saying that right. I don't think I am. But it started off with him going all off of U.S. shore to Antigua. I think that's how you say it, to get stem cell treatment to help his Achilles heal. Now, I do want to touch on this for a second because obviously that can affect the recovery process. Stem cells are something that have become more prevalent that athletes use, people like wrestlers use to really help them prolong their careers. Obviously, they are a newer form of treatment, but they are increasingly popular with all of these athletes to be able to sustain more years onto their careers. So, obviously that is one of the things that he used to help his Achilles heel, which by the way, I mean, and Kirk has said this before, he said that his Achilles was never the issue. He felt like it was his ankle that there wasn't a connection there. And obviously, as we got later into the season, when he had the big shoulder injury, at that point, that's really, and we'll get into all of it. He said he wanted his Achilles heel much faster than it did, which, I mean, look, for a 35, 36-year-old quarterback, it's going to be a little bit of a longer recovery process than if you're 25, 26. That's just the reality to it, especially with the beating that Kirk has already taken in his career. This is his third team at this point. Kirk Cousins last year was year 13 for him. That certainly some things that you do have to account for. But yeah, Kirk loves great clips. I think they said that in the first show too, the first season, that he loves great clips. That's where he goes and gets his haircuts. Nothing wrong with that. I've been to great clips a few times myself. It's nothing special, but it gets the job done. And sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do. One of the things that I think we knew and we kind of figured is that when Kirk was deciding where he wanted to sign last offseason, he wanted a place that he could go and find stability at. Basically, a place he could go finish his career with. And, this is about to lead me into, obviously the big point that I'll, talk about and I'll really dive into. He wanted stability deciding where he wanted to sign. And I mean, look, Kirk has 3 young kids. He's got a wife. It was becoming more relevant that Minnesota was not wanting to make a long-term commitment last offseason. They wanted to go in a younger direction, which they did end up going. And I mean, even look at it, Minnesota, they didn't sign Sam Darnold. Now, Sam Darnold kind of fell apart at the end of last season, but for the most part, Sam Darnold had a great season last year, and they still didn't sign him to a long-term deal. They let him go over to Seattle because they decided to opt to keep JJ McCarthy, who is a rookie on a rookie contract, so that they can build that team up. And when you honestly look at it, if you have a good coach, which Minnesota has, it's a strategy that can absolutely work, as long as you can develop your quarterback correctly. So Kirk said that he wanted stability when deciding where he wanted to go. And honestly, there really weren't many places that made too much sense. The only real places that you could maybe say made sense were probably return to Minnesota, Washington at the number 2 pick in the draft, and they were pretty much keyed in on taking a quarterback. Denver, honestly, they were were in a big cap mess last year, so they really couldn't afford it. So when it came down to it, it really just came down to Minnesota and here in Atlanta. And obviously, we know that Kirk chose Atlanta because he was not expecting us. He was expecting to be the quarterback for at least a couple years. He was expecting to finish his career here, and he'd be the guy for a couple years, which, as we know, is obviously not the case. And this leads me into the big point, because obviously we know that when the Falcons picked Michael Penix last April, it was obviously the most shocking pick of the draft. It was the, headline coming out of the draft. What were the Falcons thinking? In hindsight, it was a genius move considering how everything played out. But Kirk himself said, and this is probably one of, if not the biggest takeaways, he said he felt, quote, misled by the decision that the Falcons had made. And even said that I'm not going to quote it because I don't know if it's exactly how he said it, but he said if he had that information during the free agency process, it certainly would have affected his decision, because he had, quote, no reason to leave Minnesota. And if both teams, which both teams did, go in the direction of picking a young quarterback, he had no reason to leave Minnesota. So that right there, number one red flag. Kirk is basically saying, looking back on it, he had no reason to leave Minnesota. And, personally, that's obviously going to rub some people the wrong way, including me. It rubs me the wrong way, because it's basically Kirk doesn't really have a reason to be here. He basically feels as if he's just keeping the field warm for his successor, who is already in the building, which, yeah, was true. And now he's keeping the bench warm for just when Penix comes over to the sidelines after every drive, which we're going to get into all that in a minute as well. But yeah, let's see. Got some notes here. They interviewed Raheem Morris as well throughout the series. And what he was saying, Raheem said that Kirk gave the Falcons a chance to win the South last year, and drafting Penix gave them a chance at long-term success. And he even said that there was, quote, no great way to navigate the situation at quarterback. Now, when looking back during all of it, I mean, yeah, Kirk, in hindsight, was the signing that gave us the best chance to win the division in 2024 when looking at it. He was the win now option, and the Falcons were certainly in that mode last year. And I will say, I do not honestly know if when the Falcons signed Kirk Cousins, they had any idea they were going to draft Michael Penix or a quarterback, period. It seems as if drafting Michael Penix was more of, at the very least, a week of the draft call that Arthur Blank was really heavy on. See, a lot of people, will love to say, oh, it was Terry's call and Terry had to explain to Arthur. No, that was an Arthur Blank call. And we're going to have to look closely at Arthur Blank here with all of this as well, because at the same time, you're not letting your GM and you're not just letting your coach make that big signing. Arthur Blank is signing off on that because at the end of the day, this is his money. And I believe that Arthur Blank was the guy who told them to go and get him a quarterback and pay him whatever the hell they had to come in and win, which, looking at the time, was the right move. Because the team, had missed the playoffs at that point 6 straight years. We were willing to do just about anything to really make that change, to really get the thing turned around. We had a roster. We had weapons on offense. We just needed a quarterback who really could just come in and not do the dumb shit that Desmond Ridder did, which is turning the ball over. If you take the turnovers out, there's a very real chance that the Falcons, both of these previous 2 seasons, 23 and 24, could very well be in the playoffs. So yeah, what's something else? Kirk said that the offense was different enough for Minnesota's to feel like it was something new, particularly with the amounts of motion. Talking about there were like 45 different shifts and motions in a Zach Robinson offense, which is really where the NFL is headed, and especially that style of offense. And with the talent that you have on this offense, you want to move guys around because then that creates unpredictability. I mean, that's kind of when you have a Drake London and you have Bijan and you have Darnell Mooney, those are guys you can move around and pretty much play anywhere on the field. You have the firepower, try to throw the defense off and basically make them look stupid. That's pretty football one-on-one. That's the entire goal of scheming. Which another thing too about this series, because obviously Kirk was not the only one on here. They had Jared Goff on, they had Joe Burrow on. You really get to see the mental aspect, especially with Kirk. I feel like with Kirk they highlighted it the most, the mental aspect of the game, having to remember plays, what really goes into game prep and all that sorts of stuff, which I think is an aspect of football that just by the casual fans, you don't account for. You don't, a lot of casual fans don't account for the game plan going into a game. They're just focused on what actually happens and how the play ends. So that's another one of those things. Let's see, just Kirk said that quote, after week one, my Achilles felt fine, but football didn't feel normal. Which, looking at that week one game, and look, it's week one. It was an AFC opponent. That loss is not the biggest loss in the world. I think what really, one of the big things about that loss was those first 3 weeks, you had 3 very tough opponents, and you had to find a way to win one of those games to keep things afloat. Which obviously the Falcons found a way to win one of those games, but I think that was the big thing. But looking back at it, it makes sense why, and I even think it was maybe TJ Yates or someone at practice, they showed the clip where they were basically playing devil's advocate, saying new city, new team, new coaches, new stadium, new house, all sorts of stuff. So it makes sense, even though it's frustrating, why Kirk looked rusty, especially in the second half of week one. It makes sense. Still frustrating, but it makes sense. And I'm not necessarily going to harp on that too much more. Let's see. Now, one thing I will say that, and I think this is going to kind of come into play later when we're talking about the woes. In the third quarter, that fumble that really turned the game around in Pittsburgh's favor, Kirk was basically saying that, yeah, he was paranoid all week that something like that was going to happen, which, you know, as a quarterback, that kind of goes and shows me that even though, yes, all those things taken into account, you've been around long enough where you kind of have to have the mental strength that isn't going to happen. You got to be the leader. You cannot be thinking that way, especially when you're the quarterback of a football team. That is the fans' job to think that way. That's not the quarterback's job to think that way. So yeah. So let's see. Moving into obviously the game in Philly, which, you know, I gotta say this about that Philly game. A lot of people will say that it was a very fluky game, how that went with Saquon dropping that ball, but people don't realize that it would have been really easy for the Falcons to have just gotten steamrolled in that game. We didn't. We went into Philly and we made it a game. And really, that game was just about having a chance in the end to win and seeing how it went. And obviously, when Kirk got the ball back under 2 minutes, he said that's where when he felt the most comfortable. He said that was the bread and butter, just those simpler plays, not too complicated stuff that he's really done for years. He's been accustomed to for years. And even, you know, what was saying that the song by Tom Petty, "Won't Back Down," he thought was the good luck. He thought was what propelled us to a win, which, hey, I'll take it however way I can get it. Let's see, what are some other things we have here? Kirk, obviously, big white girl music guy, or however you want to say it. So, um, Kirk is certainly helpful. Was certainly a veteran presence. I don't think anyone can deny that. There was a clip of him giving Bijan advice about route running. Obviously later in the year when he's on the bench and Mike is out there at quarterback, he's giving Penix, encouragement on the sideline. What's going on, Jerry? He's giving him encouragement on the sideline. Telling him, after that Washington game, that throw he made on fourth down, that was a fucking amazing throw. Told him after the Carolina game, 3 great games, which, for a rookie quarterback, it was 3 games that it felt like he really did get better in all 3 of those games. So let's see. All right. Talking about the Saints game, because obviously that was a game that, it really kind of felt like the Falcons were finally coming into a groove. They were finally finding their identity, but Kirk was not satisfied with how the offense performed. He wasn't. He said that he felt like he wasn't getting the job done. He actually voice memoed Raheem and Zach Robinson and TJ Yates. He felt like he wasn't getting the job done. He felt like he wasn't doing what he needed to do that was necessary. So for a quarterback to be able to do that, especially after a win, that shows that Kirk is certainly there are plus sides of certainly having a guy like Kirk Cousins in the building, because he is able to tell it like it is even after a win, and especially after a win against a team like the Saints, where someone like me, I'm just happy we beat the Saints. But for someone like Kirk to, go in there as the quarterback and say, you know what, coach, I haven't been getting the job done. I feel like we could be doing better. Tell me what I need to do that is better. Massive respect for Kirk on that aspect. Now here are some things. Obviously, that was the first game that Kirk discovered swag surf. And obviously, he instantly got hooked onto it, as anyone would with at least 2 brain cells that goes to a Falcons game. That is one of the most, win or loss, that is one of the most electric parts about going to a Falcons game. Let's see. Kirk got cookout after the win versus the Saints. He got the cookout. I think it was the one further down on North Side, and the drive-through lady, she said she was a Saints fan. She didn't know what the hell happened. She didn't know he played for the Falcons. She didn't even know there was a game going on that day. She didn't know that Kirk was the quarterback for the Falcons. She said she was a Saints fan, so she didn't know what the hell was going on. So yeah, let's see. He called Raheem and the other coaches, said, quote, "I'm not playing well enough." And obviously they use that. And listen, that was a short week versus Tampa, where there's really not a lot of time to really, go over things and really make any major fixes. You really just got to go on the fly on those short weeks. It's, basically it's a crash course if you're going to talk about it for all those short week games. Kirk does like Coldplay and Creed. I think we all kind of knew that was his type of music. Here's what's interesting. This is a key part of Kirk's preparation. He uses a notebook to prepare for games and memorize plays and basically take notes. And it went back to when Minnesota played Tampa week 1 in the 2023 season. To basically, and he studied that because, that was obviously Todd Bowles was coaching that team. And that was a Todd Bowles defense. He basically used that in many aspects to master and crack the code on Tampa's defense, which I guess when you look at it, makes sense as to why his 2 best games were against Tampa, because he was most prepared for Tampa. Based off of that, he was able to prepare the most for Tampa. He was able to throw 500 yards on a short week, but he used some preparation. He studied Tampa's defense. That's what every quarterback should be doing. That was one of the big gripes against Vic when he was here. Vic did not really study anything. He just went off pure athletic ability and said, "I'm going to wait until I'm 30 to really start studying." And that's why the Falcons really weren't able to get farther than they did just one season going to the NFC Championship with him. So, every quarterback needs to take that approach. Needs to, because I'm going to say this: you want to win in this league, and you want to play well enough. Quarterback is probably the most important position. You got to have preparation outside of the facility, and that's what Kirk did. Kirk prepared for Tampa. He had the tools necessary, and you could say that translated into that being his two best games of the season, obviously, because this was before the Thursday night game. That was the game he threw for 500 yards. And there was certainly a sense of urgency to beat Tampa twice this year, which we did. We still didn't make the playoffs. Raheem praises Kirk's voice memos as, quote, an obsession to be great. And obviously, we all know how it goes. Kirk throws for 500 yards. The big swag surf celebration going to the back end, and that was really cloud nine. That was cloud nine as a Falcons fan to see a moment like that, and I'll always say this: between beating the Saints and then turning around 4 days later to beat Tampa, that was as high of a fever pitch you can get as a Falcons fan. And I really think was that ultimate moment where this is something different. This is something that could be very, very special if maintained. And then obviously the next week we went in, we took care of business in Charlotte. So we were sitting atop the division at that point. So let's see. We obviously get to him sweeping Tampa, having a good time. That was really the high of our season. That, and then after the Dallas game, we were 6-3. And I'll always say, after that Dallas game, Kirk was a borderline MVP candidate. He probably wouldn't have won it because Josh Allen was just so good last year, and Lamar, Joe Burrow, Goff had a great year. But Kirk was a guy that you look at the numbers, it was not crazy to just consider him a general MVP candidate. But, he said that really his Achilles healed well. It was his ankle that was his issue. And this is obviously where we're going to start to get into the downfall of the season. Because in the second quarter of that game in New Orleans, week 10, a dirty-ass Saints player drove their helmet right into Kirk's shoulder, and fucked it up, and it was not the same. And, initially looking at it, Kirk knew immediately something was wrong with that shoulder. He knew that this wasn't just a regular, just adrenaline rush. He knew it wasn't just something where, I can shrub it off, and he'll just heal very quickly. No, this was an actual injury. This was something that probably should have at least have gotten checked out in a way. And yeah, he knew something was wrong, but he just tried to shrub it off. But it became quickly apparent that it was much more than just something you could shrub off, based on even in that game on the sideline, him trying to throw. And he said he could tell that, he's really banged up. And, this is, probably a little bit more pain than he should be going through. And this is really kind of where the big issue is going to come in, that I think we take from with Kirk. Kirk said that after losing in New Orleans, things certainly turned in that moment, which it did. And we all know that because that was the beginning of a 4-game losing streak and a 2-6 finish to the season that started 6-3, sweeping Tampa and being 2 games ahead in the division. Let's see. So they did have his wife on, Julie, and she said that he doesn't complain about injuries, but did mention something about the shoulder injury to her right after that game, saying, and she basically knew at that point, like, if he's mentioning this to me, and Kirk is the type of guy that basically said he's never 100%, but he always just shrugs it off. But if he's mentioning that, she knew that minute it had to be serious. And honestly, based on everything that we're hearing, after that Saints game, Kirk probably should have been sat down for a couple weeks. Kirk knew that the injury was going to affect his play. So this is where the big issue comes in with where we're going to start. And you know what? Actually, I'll save that for the end. I'll save it for the end. Kirk knew the injury was going to affect his play. Raheem said he had faith in Kirk after the bye to get back to moments like earlier in the year, beating Tampa, beating Dallas, so on and so forth. Kirk said that on the bye week, he felt he needed to do more and try to make things happen and force them into bad situations. His wife said, Julie said, she had to delete social media during the conversation leading up to Kirk being benched for Penix. So I'm assuming this is post-Chargers game all the way leading up to, obviously, when the news broke the day after the Raiders game that Penix was now the quarterback. Kirk said the Chargers game was his worst game ever. Quote, my body was starting to break down and coaches felt like it was and the coaches felt like it was the case, which, oh boy. Kirk said Raheem called Tuesday and told him they were making the change to Penix. Julie said that she read Twitter, so I guess she downloaded social media back after the Monday Night Football game, and it really got the best of her. Julie told Kirk when Raheem called him, because I guess Kirk missed the call and Julie saw his phone. And basically at that point, they said they both knew what that meant. They knew that his ass was going to the bench, and it was Mike's time to shine. When Kirk went to see Raheem, the kids were playing, and Julie was crying. When Julie went and saw Kirk after pulling into the garage. And this is absolutely a moment. This is a moment that I love. This is a moment where I'll still give Kirk his flowers for. Because I'm going to give credit where credit is due. She saw Kirk call Mike and wish him good luck as the quarterback moving forward. And Julie said it basically brought more tears to her eyes, which, that's amazing to see. It's amazing to see. But at the same time, what else is Kirk really supposed to do with how much damn money he's getting paid at the same time? Is kind of the way that I think about it. Julie basically told the kids that Mike was going to be the quarterback, saying, quote, Mr. Michael's the quarterback now. So, yeah, Kirk said that once he lost his shoulder and elbow, questions began to rise within himself, those internal thoughts about if he should sit. So Kirk basically knew when he injured his shoulder, he probably shouldn't be out there playing for the good of the team and for the good of him. But basically then ended up saying, quote, okay, it's week 10. If I sit 2 or 3 weeks, I may never get my job back. Because we got to remember, when Kirk was starting, but Penix was still the quarterback too. This wasn't Taylor Heineke. This was somebody who we knew could be the real deal. This wasn't a Taylor Heineke. Hell, this wasn't some project quarterback. This was a guy that if you put in, you were going to see how much smoother he was than Kirk, how much more you could do with your offense. And at that point, if you're Zach Robinson and you're finally able to open up your offense in full, why the hell do you want to go back to Kirk? If you're Raheem Morris, and you can say a lot about Raheem Morris, but I would think that any NFL coach would think this way. If you see your offense operating much more smoothly under Penix, why the hell would you want to go back to Kirk? So Kirk knew that he wasn't going to get his job back. Kirk said that he made the decision based on information he had at the time to basically not report the injury. And he decided not to report the injury and stay in, which, let's see. We got a few more notes here. Raheem said he knew after the Monday night game he had to make the change, which I think we could kind of figure because, you notice for weeks and weeks, I mean, Raheem was basically keeping that memo. He had faith in Kirk. And then after he saw, I think it was really when he saw how bad the Raiders were and saw that Kirk could not bounce back against them and saw that we did not win that game. We basically had to survive that game. He knew that this isn't something that's going to get better. And we have 3 weeks left, we got a playoff push to make. And even though Kirk may be a veteran, he does not give this team the best chance to win. He is not the best quarterback on this team anymore. And honestly, I even think at this point, you could say, well, oh, Kirk is better. Kirk is this, Kirk is that. Kirk Cousins at this point does not give you the best chance to go far in your season. Not more than Michael Penix. Let's see. Few more notes here. Let's see. Kirk was always supportive of Mike, encouraging him on the sidelines, as I mentioned earlier. Kirk said he wanted to finish his career strong wherever he goes or whatever he does, which, I mean, at this point, he is still on our team. It looks like he's going to be the backup. Here's the one thing that kind of gets me and really contradicts all of Kirk's actions. He said there's really only one way to handle it. Don't make it about yourself and do what's best for the Falcons and for Michael Penix. Now, as that's all the notes I have, was basically lying to the team. Now, listen, I'm not just going to blame Kirk for this too, because there's also an aspect where Raheem Morris, as the coach of this team, he's got to make that tough call, and he's got to see. And I think this is why people raise questions about Raheem Morris. Can he really make those tough decisions? Is he capable of identifying when it is necessary to make those tough calls? Because we knew after the Chargers game that Kirk was not healthy, but they decided to keep him in and roll him into Minnesota because of how embarrassing it would probably be for him personally that he got benched the week he was supposed to be playing his former team. He was supposed to be having his homecoming. And then they thought, well, he can certainly get it right versus the Raiders. No. But at the same time, if Kirk wanted to do what was best for the team, he wanted to ensure that the team could be in a position to win down the stretch last year, he should have reported that injury the moment he knew that it was just something that this isn't normal. And that is where I say everyone is at fault. Everyone is at fault. Kirk is at fault. Raheem is at fault. And Arthur Blank is at fault too. Because honestly, even if Raheem does make that call at the same time, and this is where I'm going to kind of play devil's advocate on behalf of Raheem, how is he able to justify that to Arthur Blank? Especially if Kirk is not forthcoming about the injury. So it's like I say, it's a complicated mess of bullshit that cost the Falcons its season. But mainly it's the fact that no one decided to step up and say something was wrong before it was pretty much too damn late. Because, yeah, now we still had a chance to win the division. Let's be very clear. And after that point, after Kirk was on the bench, that's all on Raheem Morris for not calling the timeout at the end of the Commanders game. But let's say realistically, okay, bye week, you realize that Kirk is obviously not well, and you be honest with yourselves and you let Penix start that Chargers game. With how good the defense played that day, we absolutely win that game. Minnesota, I'm not going to say we win that game, but I certainly, we still probably would lose that Minnesota game. We'd probably beat the Raiders more like we were supposed to. We took care of business against the Giants. Washington, I mean, who really, but see, this is the thing. All you really needed was 2 games, and I think that personally, if Kirk was just fully honest with himself and honest with the team, I think you could have at least gotten that Chargers game, and you could have went into Week 18 controlling your own destiny. And at that point, I think, given the benefit of the doubt, I think we would beat Carolina and win the division. But look at where we were. We decided not to be honest with ourselves once again, and it caused us to miss the playoffs for another season. So honestly, where do I stand now with Kirk? Honestly, it's all going to go back to when Kirk said that he had no reason to leave Minnesota. How do you think the locker room's going to react to that? How do you think the locker room's going to react to that? And listen, I'm not dogging Kirk Cousins as a guy. I'm not dogging him as a father. Listen, one thing we learned about Kirk Cousins, he's an amazing father. I think if every kid in America had a father like Kirk Cousins, the issues that we have with our youth in this country would be greatly reduced. Kirk is an amazing father. They showed him out there coaching his boys with flag football. He is an ultimate family man, down to earth guy. I'm not gonna hate Kirk personally. But on a business end, he was selfish. He was selfish, and he decided to screw himself over and his team over. And he has no one to blame but himself for why he is sitting on the bench this year. Because maybe if he was actually honest with himself and he reported that injury, he might actually be starting somewhere this year. Maybe Cleveland would have picked him up. Maybe they wouldn't have opted to go and bring a circus like Shedeur Sanders in and have a mess of a quarterback room. Hell, maybe Pittsburgh would have decided to bring him in. Maybe it would have been easier at that point to get a team to pick up Kirk. But Kirk decided to screw himself over by staying in and not reporting the injury. And now he's going to have to ride the bench this year. But I'm going to be completely honest. I don't think... I think that Kirk Cousins still being on the team, while it's something that I've came to accept, would be reality, it is something that certainly still does not feel right. And, I really hope that Michael Penix can stay healthy and Kirk can just stay in that capacity as a mentor. Just someone on the sideline. Basically the same role Matt Shaw played for many years, when he was here as a backup. Just telling Mike what he saw, what he doesn't see. I will say, I like his presence, especially considering Tampa. I like his presence, how he prepares for Tampa, and I hope that obviously the team, because, we faced Tampa week 1. Just came out today that Tristan Wirfs is going to miss the beginning of the year for him. So it's going to be much tougher on them to protect Baker. And it's their first game with a new play caller. So they're going to have some issues. But they still have a very talented offense. That's going to be a tough game week 1. But it all goes back to what I'm saying. It all goes back to Kirk deciding to be selfish. But I'm not going to shield Raheem from blame either, because Raheem should have also been. So they're both in the wrong. They're both in the wrong. Kirk was selfish, but Raheem was living in denial. And for that, I think that's a much bigger issue that we have to focus on. And it's going to be another thing where if you don't make the playoffs this year, yeah, Raheem will be gone. So that's why, honestly, Raheem really needs to hope that Michael Penix is going to bail his ass out this year. And that offense is going to do enough, and that defense is going to also be able to hold up their end. Now, listen, because I didn't get to talk about the draft. I loved us picking Jalen Walker. James Pierce, love the pick. Listen, I know people are like, well, we traded our first round pick. No, we didn't. We just used it a year early. And honestly, when looking at it, Terry Fontenot may not see next year. Reed may not see next year. So it makes sense why they would want to use it early. I love picking Xavier Watts. I feel like he is really a guy that is going to come along as the season progresses. The only thing I will say that I kind of wish we did in our draft, I really wish we had just gotten a big guy up the middle that can really just clog space, because I feel like that's really one of the only things we're missing right now. But, still, picking Billy Bowman, that could be another guy who's starting at some point this season. And then even the tackle they picked in the 7th round, picked from Wisconsin. That's a pretty good school for offensive linemen. So listen, we had a great draft. Only 5 picks. We had a great draft. We have 5 primetime games this year? So the NFL is clearly high on us. But we're going to find out early in this year what actually this team is. We're going to find out what Michael Penix is. But I think we saw a glimpse that Michael Penix could be all right. Obviously, I think the big concern about Penix is him going down. But he stays out there, he's going to be all right. Because we got the tools on offense. But going back to Kirk, at the end of the day, I think the thing I'm going to talk about, as I continue to say this, Kirk Cousins was an amazing mentor to Michael Penix, but Kirk Cousins had no had no choice but to be, because of the fact that he is going to be the highest paid player in NFL history to ever ride the bench for a season. He's getting paid $40 million to ride the bench. And when you look at it at that point, and that kind of goes back to the comment where I don't know, I never had any reason to leave Minnesota. Well, looking back at it, we honestly could have been honest with ourselves. We could have just drafted Penix in the draft without signing Kirk, and that could have allowed us to sign someone like a Danielle Hunter and get a pass rusher in here. And then we actually just learn with a rookie. And we be more prepared for this season when looking at it. One of the reasons why maybe we couldn't do so much in free agency this past season. So yes, Kirk as a backup, as long as he is here, he better not complain one bit. Because I know I wouldn't be complaining about getting paid $40 million to sit the bench. I'm taking my money and I'm shutting the fuck up. But I really think the Falcons also need to hope that Kirk does not have to go in there, because I honestly don't know how that's going to look. I really don't. It could end up being a saving grace. It could end up being a disaster. But I just hope we don't see it. I hope the only time that we see Kirk Cousins is the final game of the season versus New Orleans, if we already have the division wrapped up and we see Kirk Cousins going up against a 3-win Saints team. That's the only way I hope we see Kirk Cousins at all this season. But yeah, that's really it. About everything that I saw. The link is in the chat if anyone wants to come in. I see we got CPG in here. We got Jerry in here. Let's see. I think we had someone else in here. Been a minute since I've been live, but listen, football season is coming up, and this is the shit or get off the pot year for the Atlanta Falcons. It's the year that it's got to come together. It is the shit or get off the pot year for this team. He'd be great trade bait, but yeah, no one wanted to pick up the contract. That was the thing. And now after this season, we can release him for nothing. So he will not be on this team past this season. I can pretty much assure that that's going to be the case. But as far as this season goes, I'm going to go ahead and say I would prefer if we could just put the Kirk Cousins BS all behind us. But at the end of the day, he's still going to be in that building. And I just hope that Kirk continues to be in that mentor role and not become a problem. I don't get the vibe that Kirk personally becomes a problem, but I just hope the stigma around him doesn't become a problem and everything that we've learned, because let's face it, he lied to the team. But yeah, this is going to be a big year. And we really got to come out, and I think we got to ride the ship. It's kind of like last year. We got to ride the ship early, but it's got to get to a point where we got to start winning these games that we've been losing for several years now. And I think we finally got the tools to do it on offense. We got a quarterback that can do it. I truly believe that Michael Penix, if he can really reach his full potential, can be a very special quarterback. And I think that where we're going on defense, also finally addressing the pass rush, that's what encourages me for this year, because they're finally doing things that have been issues for this team for a very long time. They're finally going and addressing some of those issues. So for that, I am encouraged. And at this point, I am bought in. Not everyone is bought in, but I am bought in. But they got to do it this year. This is the shit or get off the pot year, basically. And I mean, also just looking at Kirk's contract for a second, it's really, I mean, it's good that it's going to be able to come off the books after this year, because listen, Drake London, at this point, that's a guy we got to start talking about him getting paid. And at this point, I'm willing to bet that Drake London is already around the $30 million mark. I think if we were to pay Drake right now, maybe we could get him on something similar to the T. Higgins deal. But if he comes out this fall and he has a 1,500, 1,600 yard season that I think he's definitely capable of having, he's going to be north of $35 million. And then in about a year, you also got to start looking at potentially what Bijan's contract could look like, which, if as long as he stays healthy, he's no doubt going to become the highest paid running back in NFL history. So this is really it. You really right now, this is it. You want to talk about, you have to get it. You have to get it now. Now is really the time that you really have to start getting it. Because, and that it goes back to my point that even with Kirk healthy, I feel like, because let's be honest, if Kirk would have gotten us into the playoffs last year, maybe he could have won us a playoff game at most. Maybe one if maybe he was facing Minnesota. Maybe he wins us one playoff game max. He's not getting us to the Super Bowl last year. We were not a Super Bowl team last year. But I didn't think that, with a great team around Kirk, and we've seen this, Kirk Cousins has never made it to an NFC championship. Matter of fact, he only has one playoff win in his entire career, and that's versus the Aints. So there's only so much that we've seen Kirk after 13 years in this league he can do. Whereas with Michael Penix and the style of quarterback that he is a modern day NFL quarterback. Sure, he is more of a pocket passer, but he's certainly more elusive. He can get out of the pocket and make plays. We don't like to see him use his legs a lot because of all of his lower body injuries, but he can still do it. Hell, before Penix suffered all those lower body injuries, he was more of a runner. He pretty much was a carbon copy of Michael Vick, but after he got injured, that's really where he had to polish up on a lot of his passing. I still feel like accuracy is a concern with him, but we are getting to a point where I really feel like Penix gives us the best chance to win. I think everyone can see that. It's his team. And it's Kirk Cousins' job to not make a big fucking deal of it and not be a big distraction of it. and be a mentor. So with that being said, I really don't have much else to say about this. But the season is getting closer, and as the season gets closer, it's going to be time to start, looking at some of the storylines heading into training camp. And obviously the preseason. I think one of the things I'm looking for as far as preseason goes is going to be the kicker competition between Koo and this guy that they brought in from Germany. I would probably lean that Koo stands a good chance to get his job back. However, he's going to have to earn it. He's going to have to earn it, and there's going to be some pressure on him. Obviously, there's some secondary battles I think we're going to see as far as like who's starting in the nickel and who's starting opposite of Jesse Bates at that other safety position, which I think regardless, it won't be long, even if it's not week one, before we see Xavier Watts take that position. I mean, you basically have two Jesse Bates in the back half of your secondary. You have two ball hawks. And, I feel like that's good. I also feel like, though, for Watts especially, it's going to have to be because I think the only real concern with that is getting bent on a lot of those big, deep passes. NFC South roundtable. Hey, I'm in. I'm in on it. Just let me know when it is. CPG, you know how to contact me. And we can absolutely do it sometime before the season starts. Matter of fact, I think the first time I play y'all is like week 3. Obviously, you play Tampa week 1. So our first 3 games are division games. We got first 3 games, week 1 at home versus Tampa, week 2 Sunday night at Minnesota, and week 3 in Charlotte. So I'm going to say this. I feel like if you can start this season 1-1, I feel like you're in a pretty good spot. I will definitely say that. I feel like if you can start this season 1-1, you're definitely in a solid position. And honestly, I don't know what game you would win. I'd like to, obviously you would want to win that Tampa game. But I mean, we do have to remember that week 1, anything can happen. But it's definitely more important since it is a division game. And, week 2 going to Minnesota, it's going to be tough. But at the same time, there's a lot of questions and unknowns about where Minnesota is going to be with their quarterback situation, and what JJ McCarthy is going to look like. Yeah, that's y'all's home opener. Yeah, I would make it up there, but I don't think I'm going to be able to this year. I actually think that weekend or somewhere around it, I got something. Obviously, I don't think it's the day of the game, but I think it's like the day before that game, because I think that game is, when's that game? The 21st. I think the 20th. I got a family commitment for that day, but so I won't be able to make that trip. And then got something else to do the day before we play the Aints down in New Orleans, which, Jerry, y'all ain't doing shit this year. Y'all are the only team that y'all season's already over. So it's just between us and Carolina, and I don't really know. I mean, I guess Cam Dawson, if he's down, he's the only Tampa fan I'm really aware of. I actually met him last year at the game we played Tampa. He was a cool dude, man. He's a cool dude. I'll show see RTP. Yeah, or RTP. I forgot. He's a Tampa fan. So, yeah, definitely for sure. Get in touch with me. And just let me know if it's going to happen. NFC South Roundtable sometime before the season starts, and how we feel about our teams. But as I say, it's getting ready to be that time of year where it's time to start looking at these schedules. It's time to start, really looking at what could come with training camp. That's why I felt like tonight was a good night to go live because obviously I wanted to talk about this, but also just really kind of get started, with the season because I know we're all Braves fans and the Braves fucking suck this year. So I'm ready for football at this point. And I kind of have been for a couple weeks, but I'm really getting ready now that we're less than a month away from preseason starting. Actually, I think we got a game on the 31st. I think that's going to be the first preseason game. So I'm ready. I'm ready for this thing to get underway. Um, but yeah, a lot I think to be excited for this year. Um, for the Falcons and I guess Carolina and Tampa. I don't really know what joy there is in being a Saints fan this year, but yeah. Um, the Braves suck. The Braves are probably they ain't gonna do shit after the All-Star break. They're gonna be like a 70-win team. You know, let's see. I'll anyone wants to come up, I'll drop the link in one more time. If not, I'll get ready to get up out of here in a minute. But yeah, it's getting there. Listen, I always say when it gets past the 4th of July, before you know it, it's time for football. Um, well, I mean, the thing is, Acuna has only been back for a little over a month, and he's been the best player on the team this whole season. Him and I mean Olsen's had a pretty good stretch lately. I like what I've seen out of Drake Baldwin. But listen, when Sale goes down and Schwelly goes down, and you got Strider coming back from an injury, and it's going to take him a year to really learn everything, especially now that he can't throw 100 anymore. And I mean, when Grant Holmes is your best pitcher, you ain't going to do shit. You just got to accept that. But yeah, man, listen, it's getting time for football. It is getting time to start preparing for the NFL season, and I feel like it's about time that the Atlanta Falcons get back into the playoffs. And listen, with how open I think the NFC is going to be this year, I think it's a very good year to be in the NFC. I think because I feel like the AFC it's still going to be about the same three or four teams of Cincinnati could get their shit together. But as far as the NFC goes, I really think that I think everyone believes that Philly is going to once again make it back to the Super Bowl. First of all, there hasn't been a repeat winner of that division in 20 years, and Saquon's not rushing for 2,000 again. And I mean, Philly's still going to be really good, and when it comes to playoff time, they probably will be one of the favorites, but they're not going to be as dominant as they were last year. So you got that. But no, I think the NFC South. I don't know if I still feel like Carolina might be a year away from really, getting to the top of the division, at least competing there. But I feel like with how open the wild card race is going to be this year, you're going to have a lot of teams like Carolina, Arizona, Chicago, Minnesota. If McCarthy turns out to be all right. Green Bay or Detroit, whoever doesn't win that division, between those two will be in there. Dallas could be in there if Schottenheimer is able to get anything out of that team. So there's real. I mean, the only two teams you could really I think say are dead in the NFC are New Orleans and the Giants. I think outside of that, pretty much every other team I wouldn't fully count out yet. San Francisco, I guess if they return to their form, they're a wild card team. But yeah, listen, these are conversations. These are good conversations. That we're gonna that we're going to have in these next couple weeks as the season starts. But with that being said, I think I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. Appreciate you gentlemen for tapping in. And I will see you all in the next one. And the next one is going to be a whole lot sooner than 4 months from now.